Hey guys, welcome to the latest episode of the Sports Minority Report. I'm Toby. Today we're going to talk about Texas State joining the PAC. With any sort of move and realignment, there are winners and losers. And so today we're going to name the winners and name the losers, six of each. Well, we're going to start with the winners. Obviously, winner number one, the biggest winner, is Texas State. Um, Contrary to popular opinion, realignment is not about just accumulating more money if you're a smart leader. Realignment for smarter institutional leaders answers the question: does this conference allow your revenue sports to grow? Now, that's a very important question. You can make the money to another conference, just make the move to another conference just for money. But if you do that, you often end up in a conference where you can't compete. The schools that make the smart decisions are looking at what the conference does for them. If you look at schools like Rice, Tulsa, and Charlotte in the AAU, they're getting great money in the I said the AAU in the AAC. They're getting great money, but they're in a conference where winning in the two revenue sports is really stacked against them, and it's making them conspicuous as schools that are not delivering value for that conference. It's also preventing them from moving up to a better conference. So you have to make these decisions. Texas State was like that in the Sun Belt for over a decade. The idea is to make your two revenue sports, men's basketball and football, better. You want to get into a conference where they have a higher ceiling, and then in that conference you end up making more money, and you just repeat that kind of thought process as many times as necessary. That's how Louisville climbed the ranks. That's how TCU climbed the ranks. You want to get into conferences where your two revenue sports can prosper. If you can't build your revenue sports, generally you can't climb the ladder of realignment, and you end up like a conference doormat. So it's not always smart to just chase money. Um, Texas State is in the Austin DMA. It's right on the border, right next to the San Antonio DMA. Those are two big NFL cities, NFL size cities, NFL NBA size cities. Um, if you live in a city like that, there are a lot of entertainment options that you can enjoy. And this is a problem for teams that are located in these cities. A lot of times they're competing with NFL teams for public football dollars. That's going to be a problem for UNLV. It has been a problem for Rice and for Houston and for Temple. Um, a lot of times you're competing with NBA teams. That's a problem for UT San Antonio. They will always struggle to build a program in basketball because San Antonio is the Spurs town. They own it. Texas State, on the other hand, is about as far as away as you can get um, from San Antonio, from the San Antonio Spurs and the Texas men's basketball team in those two DMAs. They're just right on the fringe of it. So they have a chance. I mean, I can see Texas State building to a point where they're drawing 4,000 people in basketball, where they're a consistent annual NCAA bubble team. I can see that kind of future in this conference. Um, but that wasn't possible in the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt is a small time conference in Texas. Nobody cares. It's like being an FCS or a Division II school in Texas. Nobody cares. I mean, you might have, people love football. So if you are in a small community and you're Division II, yeah, you might draw from that small community, but you're not going to draw viewership across the state. People won't care. The Sun Belt membership would have never allowed Texas State to show off their media relevance, to show it displayed in media stats. Without strong media numbers, no one would have paid Texas State a full media share. That was the problem. That was the problem with the PAC. And being in the Sun Belt would have made that a continual problem. Anytime they tried to leave a conference, they'd look at their media numbers, and they'd have these miserable Sun Belt media numbers, because no one in San Antonio and no one in Austin wants to watch Sun Belt football. They just don't. I live in Denton. UNT used to be in the Sun Belt. We had the same problem. We were stuck in the Sun Belt. Membership in the Sun Belt might be good for like maybe an East Texas school like Sam Houston, or an FCS upgrade with limited media appeal, like maybe Stephen F. Austin. But for larger Texas schools like UNT and Texas State, or even Tarleton State, schools with good local media arguments, the Sun Belt is like a sticky tar pool. You're stuck in anonymity and limited athletics. And then there was also the UTSA situation. UTSA was clearly blocking Texas State from getting into the AAC. Now, Texas State has hurdled UTSA and is in a better conference than UTSA forever. If Texas State hadn't made the move, they would have been checkmate, and they would have been stuck in the Sun Belt forever. UTSA was in a better conference in the AAC. They were using their position in the AAC almost certainly to keep Texas State from moving up. That would have allowed UTSA a recruiting advantage over Texas State. But now Texas State has hurdled UTSA into a better conference that is likely always going to be a better conference. If Texas State hadn't made the move to the PAC, they would have been checkmated in the Sun Belt or a lesser conference like the Mountain West Conference forever. Now they're in a conference where they can make the playoffs in both revenue sports, where that's a legitimate possibility every year. And I'm going to make a bold prediction. I think Texas State will make their first NCAA basketball tourney in this century in the next 6 years of this TV contract as a member of the PAC. I think they, I mean, obviously they could sneak in and win the PAC tournament. I don't think that's going to happen. A more likely scenario is that they're a bubble team with a couple really good wins that will get into to play in a basketball conference that has an insane strength of schedule. So Texas State is number one. Go Bobcats. Anyway, number two, I'm going to say that the second big winner is Kelly Damphousse. Texas State fans love their president for his commitment to athletics and research. So I hope those fans will forgive me for suggesting that he made some mistakes and had some stuff to prove down the line. President Damphousse had put himself in a bad situation with this whole soup talk thing. If you don't know what I'm talking about, he basically started in code bitching about negotiations with the PAC publicly in his tweets. That is Bush League. And that put him in a really awkward situation the last 3 weeks. Texas State's president had two pathways forward. Standing behind his line in the sand, arbitrary line in the sand, I might add, and taking the non-PAC path where UTSA could still block them from the ACC. That was option one. He could continue to take that hardline stance against taking a junior partner share, a scaled dispersion, the only scaled one currently in the PAC, and seeing Texas State remain in the Sun Belt or join the Mountain West Conference. Not very exciting. Or he could eat a little crow, take the best deal he could get for his school financially, and get them really into their ideal long-term conference home, the PAC. He could either be known as the guy who took Texas State from a bad Sun Belt school into the P5, or the guy who texted about soup. He swallowed his pride and took a lesser share. There's nothing to be ashamed about it. It's no betrayal of Texas State. There are two revenue sports. Texas State is only significant in one of the two. How much would Texas State have gotten if the PAC had offered them a football only membership? I think pretty much what you got right now. That's what you were paid. So in that regard, you got a football only membership, but you also get to play basketball in the conference. That's okay for now. This is only 6 years. You know who else is on a scale payment in a new conference? Oregon, Stanford, Washington, UTSA. To act like it was a personal attack on your school was just an insane position to take in the first place. Props to him for coming back down to reality in time. Danfus made the right call. You hope that your president of your school is going to be a good steward for your university, and he proved to be a great one. So props to him. Second winner on my list. Third winner. I've got a trio of people on my people/institutions on my third list. Teresa Gould, Oregon State, and Washington State. Now, let's be clear. Oregon State and Washington State's leaders have carte blanche say over who gets into this conference. They designed their conference expansion plan that way. And that was the smart thing to do. All Mountain West Conference schools make horrible conference realignment decisions. As somebody who has followed realignment for decades, I can tell you that as a fact, they are horrible. Horrible, horrible, horrible. That lack of say for most of the Mountain West Conference 5 has been the greatest asset for the PAC in building this conference. Now, that said, my perception is that Oregon State and Washington State were among the worst realignment voices in the PAC, and they're in the old PAC. And there is no question they burned opportunities right and left, waiting for the ACC or Big 12 to come strolling along and rescue them before they got serious about building a conference. They could have literally done this exact same thing far cheaper 2 years ago, and it was the most likely end scenario. So why didn't they do it? They just, again, not great realignment instincts. Commissioner Gould was their mouthpiece and their messenger throughout this whole process, so she gets lumped in with them on this. I think their mistake started literally at the beginning. If I were running this, I would have added Gonzaga and San Diego State specifically, and the 4 schools would have been the schools making the decisions jointly as to who to add. Now, Oregon State and Washington State, they had all the money, so that was their choice to make. But I think things would have gone a lot smoother if you'd had 2 football-focused schools, Oregon State and Washington State, and 2 basketball-focused schools in San Diego State and Gonzaga working together to call the shots. It just would have made more sense. But they didn't start, and I can understand that the mechanics of it, they might have only been able to add Gonzaga from the start. Because if you add San Diego State, then maybe Boise State doesn't come, and just a lot of headache. But if you'd added Gonzaga from the start, that would have helped you in the early process. And you probably could have got them cheaper. The standard for adding a basketball school to an Olympic, a non-football school to a football conference, historically has been about 25% share or maybe a third share. That's usually all that they do. And they probably could have gotten Gonzaga for maybe a third to a 50% share. I'm not sure what they would have required, but it probably was a lower price if they had started with them. From what I understand, they made an effort to add Hawaii as a budget add early on, and I think that was a good move. That would have been something that that I would have done, because Hawaii was just a partial member of the Mountain West Conference. You could have snuck them out the door with as little cost as possible, and they bring the midnight broadcast window with them, which is a incredibly valuable asset that would scale to better competition. You could have Hawaii in the conference, but just because it's a better conference, you get paid more for that midnight window. It would have scaled well. Anyway, they made Hawaii an offer that was good enough for the Mountain West Conference to beat. even from day one as a non as a football only member of the Mountain West Conference. That's not how you land a school. You give them an offer that they really can't refuse. Then they blew the AAC rate, forcing them to then go back to Gonzaga and say, we know you've been wanting to get in and you've been very politely waiting, but now we really need you. Gonzaga said, sure, yeah, but we're a full share member now. So they blew that too. And then they blew landing UNLV. Now that one I don't want to say blew because that's not really fair to them. They didn't get UNLV, but it was mostly because they were outfoxed by the Mountain West Conference commissioner, Gloria Navarez. It's not really on you if somebody has just a better plan and you did your best, which I think they did in the case of UNLV. But none of that reflected well on Gould or the two-pack of Washington State and Oregon State. John Canzano reported that the two-pack pushed hard back to their membership in the last 3 weeks ahead of the final negotiations that Texas State was not worth a full media share currently. Now that was a real interesting statement to hear coming out. It makes you wonder, why? Why did they do that? I mean, the logical response is because they were likely under fire from Gonzaga and the Mountain West Conference 5. The way things are structured is that the two-pack made the decisions on realignment, and the rest of the conference just sort of, they could make suggestions, but it was the Oregon State and Washington State who made the decisions. And it's understandable. Gonzaga and the Mountain West Conference 5 didn't want to see the 2-year NCAA deadline for the PAC to rebuild with 8 full sports members to pass, and all of the work that all of those schools did to fall apart. But that didn't happen. And now the PAC is NCAA compliant. They are a real honest to gosh conference. Canzano, who knows a lot more than he lets on, thinks that Texas State will make a little more than they made in the Sun Belt, and slowly escalate to almost a full share over the first PAC media deal. Now, I thought that was a really interesting word choice. A little more to me is a tell. It's a very curious way to describe them. Everyone's been talking about, well, Texas State is going to get a half share, but that's not what he chose to describe it as. And a little more than what they made in the Sun Belt would suggest that in the Sun Belt they're making probably just a little bit under $3 million. That would suggest that something close to $3 million is the starting point on what they're getting in the PAC. Given the glee that the Texas state president and Commissioner Gould and pretty much everyone involved in this has, and the comments that Commissioner Gould made stating that we both feel really good where we landed on the agreement. I suspect it wasn't a one-sided negotiation. The PAC-2 didn't come in and say, take 50% or we add New Mexico State. It's a lot more likely the PAC made a trivial financial concession, and Danfus said, well, that's good enough. Now, assuming a PAC full share at this moment is worth roughly $9 million or $54 million over 6 years, if the PAC got what Bill, that college football guy, a guy on YouTube who has a wonderful channel, said his sources predicted a few months back, and got a 2/3 share or $36 million over 6 years, their payments may be something in the ballpark of $3 million, $4.2 million, $5.4 million, $6.6 million, $7.8 million, and $9 million. And that progression sounds exactly what Canzano is describing. That sounds like a very workable deal for the PAC that likely leaves a little bit of meat on the bone that they needed. and sets the stage for additional ads of other schools at appropriate rates. Um, all parties involved reported a lot of congratulatory backslapping after Texas State agreed to the deal last Thursday. Gould reports a lot of gratitude from the rest of the Pac 12 members to Oregon State and Washington State. Now, that again kind of tipped me. For her to note that publicly actually suggests that it might be kind of a new status quo, which isn't that surprising. It's tough to expose yourself financially like they did and have to wait for someone else to close a deal that affects you. And they've been waiting around for months for this. The two-pack and their commissioner Gould landed a real conference after a number of blunders, and it appears to be a conference with some growth in the near future as well. I think you have to look at that and say they're winners, absolute winners. Um, Number 4 on my list is a school that will surprise a lot of you. It's Memphis. Memphis fans hate what the AAC has become, specifically what it's become in basketball. They also recognize that the new PAC is better in football. They want Memphis to move conferences. Memphis, for their part, was looking at a P4 invite. They're hoping to get into the ACC or the Big 12. The Big 12 appears pretty solid with their membership right now. It's pretty stable. And I think they're years away from expansion. They're going to wait until something happens with the ACC and then try and pry out some schools or something. I'm not sure if that's going to happen in the next 5 or 6 years, or it's not happening immediately. And the ACC has some other things going on. A few months ago, Notre Dame more or less dropped the hint that they were didn't drop the hint. They flat out said that they were going to be kind of taking a role, a leadership role in the ACC to try and keep the conference together. They also said that if they lose schools, they may not add any more schools, but if they did, they're going to add schools that are like-minded. Well, that is really specific, and it's telling, and I think it sent a message to who it was intended, and that message was received. Tulane and USF are both academic schools that are well in line with the ACC and Notre Dame. Tulane is AAU. USF just became AAU, and those schools make a lot of sense. Memphis does not have that academic reputation. It seems like that message was intended specifically for Memphis to just let them know that, hey, man, ACC is not coming for you. And it looks like Memphis took the hint. Memphis had been very upset with how they were approached by the PAC, and they had pretty much shut down any sort of conversations with the PAC. They have gone a complete 180 since then. Over the time since the AAC's or the ACC's new position has come out, Memphis has warmed to the PAC and seen a new suitor arise for their Olympic sports in the Big East. Memphis hates the idea of the PAC footprint for their Olympic sports. They don't want to travel that far. The Big East is a much better and a much more lucrative home for their Olympic sports than the PAC or the AAC, sorry, the American. They're looking at they would get probably $6 million a year from the PAC as a football-only member, and another $8 million in the Olympic sports from the Big East. That sounds really good, but how do you get there? This is sort of the plan that's been floating around. There's a lot of smoke around that plan. It yields Memphis the most money they can get outside of the P4 ranks, and it puts their schools or the programs, both of the revenue programs, into conferences where they can actually compete for national titles. It does everything Memphis wants outside of being in a P4 conference. The two pack of Washington State and Oregon State at their core are football myopic schools. They only want Memphis for football. That's the sport that's going to make Oregon State or Washington State, and that's why they want Memphis. Um, you know, Really, the only reason they want Memphis is for football or to deny the AAC Memphis. Now, is that a dumb position to take? Yes, absolutely. Especially when you consider that Memphis could get passed over again by the Power Four in the next round of realignment. Memphis is really in the Big 12 or bust camp right now, and it's very possible that they don't have the advocates again, and they get passed over again. Now, if that happens, do you really want to lose out on Memphis basketball and not having that in your conference? I think the PAC needs to rethink that. But, to be fair to the two PAC, it's a fair position to take in that a Memphis loss just prior to the scheduled AAC media partner look-in window, where the media partner looks at their TV ratings and stuff and determines whether or not the AAC is overpaid. That's likely to drive down the media worth of the AAC, causing potentially a cascade of failures in that conference. Which, if you're the PAC, you're kind of not unhappy if that happens. The only problem for Memphis's plan is that the PAC needed an eighth all-sports member by July to remain a conference. They had to be a conference to make that offer to Memphis. So Memphis, I think, likely told the PAC, if you add Texas State to give us access to Texas recruiting, we'll join you as a football-only member. Now, I got nothing official. This is just me reading the tea leaves, seeing what rumors are out there, and what sounds reasonable. I think that this has happened. That's just my gut feeling. I got nothing to base that on. Just rumors that are out there, and they're rumors. The PAC got Texas State, so now Memphis is cleared for takeoff. The number 5 winner, that's Gonzaga and the Mountain West Conference 5. Let's be clear. If, as reported, the 2-pack came out 3 weeks ago and really stressed that Texas State wasn't worth a full share today, that tells me their other members were looking at the deadline for the conference 2-year rebuilding clock and sweating bullets. They may have been pushing the 2-pack to just add New Mexico State and quit screwing around. These schools put themselves in all kinds of financial trouble to seek this association, this new PAC, and now they find all their moves justified. So congratulations to Gonzaga and the Mountain West Conference 5. Finally, the last of our winners is one that you'll find very surprising. The Air Force Academy. The PAC officially becoming a conference, and the likelihood that the amount of money the Mountain West Conference gets from the PAC and their former members is likely going to be less than the Mountain West Conference predicted, opens up a lot of potential possibilities for the Air Force Academy. And I'll cover this probably in the next video that I do, but it's really looking good for the Air Force. Now we're going to get to the losers, people who this absolutely did not make their day. The number 1 loser in this whole process is New Mexico State. Now, New Mexico State, you may go, oh, how can you say that? That's not fair. Why are you kicking on New Mexico State? Well, I like New Mexico State, but this was an opportunity. This opportunity to join the PAC was going to be the greatest realignment moment in the history of either New Mexico State or Texas State. It was one or the other. It legitimately could have been New Mexico State's moment. They had the ability to make this deal happen. They just blew it. New Mexico State made an offer. They said, hey, we'll come in, we'll take a 20% share or 25% share. I'm not sure if it was 20 or 25% share. And, you guys let us in, and that's that. Well, it was a half-ass offer. They really didn't do the things they needed to do. And because of that, they got passed over. New Mexico State's leadership blew the moment. They allowed Texas State's leadership to recover from their cringeworthy, PAC infuriating half a bowl of soup comment. I mean, that was their moment. You know, once they made the soup comment, they had about a month and a half where they could have nailed this thing down. There's no avoiding this. New Mexico State blew their opportunity to permanently escape the wastelands of the FBS. They were in exactly the same kind of situation as Texas State. You know, New Mexico State has UTEP and UNM who constantly block them from getting into conferences. You know, and UTEP and UNM are not even in a good conference. It absolutely hobbles New Mexico State. And this was their opportunity to climb over them, to jump over them, to leapfrog them, just like Texas State leapfrogged UTSA. And that all reflects poorly on New Mexico State for not reading the moment. Their athletic department, their president, their board. Do with that what you will, New Mexico State boosters. I would like to end that one on a comment by Teresa Gould on expansion after adding Texas State. Her exact words were, "We have time to be thoughtful." That is absolutely the last thing you want to hear if you're New Mexico State. You know, you had an opportunity, a limited time opportunity to climb into this negotiation, and you blew it. Loser number 2, the AAC. I think this greases the skids for Memphis to leave the AAC. I think that will destabilize the AAC and potentially kill that conference. Bill, that college football guy who I've mentioned before, has a YouTube channel, has talked about this for about a year and a half now. And I'm inclined to agree with him. I think the AAC is in real trouble. I think they've got to make some changes. Commissioner Gould advised that the PAC is trying to build bowl game alliances with other top 5 conferences. Now, think about that statement. Okay, if the PAC believes they're the 5th of the top 5 conferences, that's the PAC saying that they're only going to play bowl games against P4 conferences. That's strategically brilliant. It's really smart to do. But it also suggests that the PAC will not be playing any lesser conferences like the AAC. I think the AAC's best move is to try to effectively buy the media rights of the Air Force Academy from the Mountain West Conference. Now, this sounds like a crazy-ass statement, and I will cover that in the subject of my next video. It will be the subject of it. But number 2 loser, it's definitely the AAC. The third loser is not a loser in my mind, but they may feel like they've lost something, and that's St. Mary's. Getting Texas State at less than a full share, I think, reopens the door for the PAC to complete their long speculated expansion plan of acquiring Texas State and then St. Mary's. I think their plan was always to get Texas State at a reduced number and then get St. Mary's at a reduced number. Both of the programs are very valuable, but have legitimate warts. Texas State, their basketball program is a non-factor. St. Mary's doesn't have football, and they're a very small school. I think St. Mary's had hoped that every PAC member would be getting full member shares, and that St. Mary could play hardball, given that they had outperformed Gonzaga on the court over the last 4 years. That sounds crazy, but if you look at it, it's true. They're slightly better than Gonzaga the last 4 years. I don't think that this plan of St. Mary's was economically viable. I don't think the PAC had the TV revenue to make this work. And I think this has been a huge issue for the PAC, for the 2-PAC anyway. Now, with Texas State in at either a 50% or more likely a 66% share, and Memphis likely coming in at a similar payout as a football-only member, the PAC can push back on St. Mary's and say, well, you're a tiny school playing in a tiny arena who doesn't have football. I mean, we can acknowledge you've outperformed Gonzaga in the same conference over the last 4 years, but come on, man, they've done it for 20 years. They have made the conference every year since 2000. That is just insane. Nobody does Their coach is the winningest basketball coach of all time. They're West Coast Duke. Um, we're not going to pay you what we pay Gonzaga. Plus Gonzaga had us over a barrel when we added them. We have all the leverage now. If you want to come, we're more than happy to pay you a third share on the initial TV deal. And possibly we can renegotiate a little more on future deals if you keep winning. That may be frustrating for St. Mary's leadership, but they need to get over it. It's the right path to take. A 1/3 share might be just under $3 million. Costs about $1 million to leave the West Coast Conference with a year's notice. I think St. Mary's would take that. Gould is saying a lot of her media partners are excited about the PAC basketball offerings specifically. And she said this, and this part's in quotes. Certain media partners are very dialed in to wanting a lot of quality basketball. And she accentuated a lot. I think that suggests that they're gonna get St. Mary's. They're gonna go get a little bit more basketball juice. Like Texas State, the St. Mary's needs to think about conference home, not the conference payout. It's the home first. Does the home work for you, and then the money will come. Number 4 in terms of losers. And again, I don't think this is a serious loser, but I think it's a perception loser. It's UNLV. UNLV likely was hoping that the PAC Mountain West Conference arbitration would be over by the PAC's deadline for needing an 8th all-sports member rolled around. But that was not the case. One can imagine a motivated PAC with Texas State unwilling to take less money, looking at having to add New Mexico State to complete the conference, and maybe being willing to make the Mountain West Conference and UNLV a sweetheart deal to acquire UNLV to complete the conference. But all the timing was off. They're still in arbitration. Now, is it possible that the Mountain West Conference leadership stalled to remove this leverage from UNLV? I think absolutely that's very possible. I think UNLV could still end up in the PAC, but I think the odds are much lower now that Texas State has made the PAC an official conference again. UNLV will probably remain in the Mountain West Conference, and that's a good home for them. They can dominate the conference, hopefully, and find their way maybe into the Big 12. The money likely made available to UNLV is now less than they may have hoped, and that probably means that they're more likely to stay in the Mountain West Conference. The number 5 loser, and I probably should have put this higher on the list because they are a real loser in this scenario, is UTSA, the University of Texas San Antonio. The Roadrunners moved into Conference USA and then into the AAC and looked well positioned to successfully block Texas State from ever getting into a good conference. That allowed UTSA to out-recruit Texas State and appear to be the better media asset. Well, those days are done now. The AAC without Memphis and Tulane and USF, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. The AAC without Memphis, with Tulane and USF looking longingly at the ACC, is not only firmly the 6th best conference, but it is also a conference looking squarely at a CUSA-like fall from grace. Texas State is positioned well to move ahead of UTSA in both revenue sports now, and their fans in both Austin and San Antonio DMAs will set them apart in terms of media coverage locally, as well as strongly diminishing the Roadrunners' appeal to the PAC. UTSA was a stronger school in conferences that were higher in the pecking order than the conference Texas State was in. Now they're in a conference that is behind the conference Texas State is in. UTSA would be smart to call the PAC and beg for a full membership now before the AAC potentially collapses and UTSA's value in the eyes of the PAC diminishes. Both things are likely to occur in the future. Today, they could get in, although they might be required to take the same media payout schedule as Texas State in deference to the Bobcats, forcing them maybe to eat a little bit of a loss. But that would be worth doing. That could be massaged a bit as the AAC has their 27-month notice rule, allowing UTSA potentially to have to only endure 3 to 4 years of junior partner payouts instead of the 6 facing Texas State. UTSA may find that their best future in the next few years may be as a football only member of the PAC and as an Olympic member of some other lesser conference like Conference USA, the Southland, or even the Summit. The PAC wants schools good in both revenue sports, schools like UNT. UNT fans want to be in an east-facing conference. That works for the AAC today, and that is something that is probably making the AAC seem more stable to UTSA. But do not snooze on the implications of the PAC and Rice talking, UTSA fans. Allegedly, the 2PAC is after Rice as a football-only member. Now, this would almost certainly be to secure Houston as a media market and a recruiting ground in football. Like I said, the 2PAC is very football-oriented. Now, I cannot see the value of a football-only PAC membership to Rice. What would they do with their Olympic sports? Join the Southland? I can't see that. And yet, they are talking. So why are they talking? I think Rice sees the writing on the wall. I think they see Memphis is going to be going. I think they see USF and Tulane are going to be heading out the door to the ACC at some point. And then, what's going to happen with the ACC? The AAC. At that point, you've almost got 2 separate regional conferences with a gap between each of them. You could see, the Eastern schools maybe forcing their views onto the Western schools. It could get ugly. You could see the conference maybe turning on the bottom tier schools. Now, athletically, right now, Rice is one of the bottom tier schools, or raids by other conferences. That's what some think are going to happen. They think the AAC will just be eaten by the smaller conferences. I think Rice looks at the PAC as their potential savior next home as a full member. And that's a very smart play. I can see Rice taking a page from Houston and leveraging a PAC membership into turbocharging the OWL basketball program. That makes sense, and I suspect Rice is trying to extract that kind of offer. That's why they're in the conversation. Rice is the plug in the AAC Texas tub. If Rice gets pulled, I firmly believe that UNT, a school coveted both by the football and basketball side of the PAC, will finally go against UNT fans' wishes and join a west-facing conference. Then what happens to the AAC as a home conference for UTSA? With Texas State on board, you may now be the least attractive member of the AAC schools in Texas to the PAC. You don't want to snooze on realignment, UTSA. Or put another way, you should always sell your stock a day too early rather than a day too late. So they're loser number 5. The 6th place loser is the Mountain West Conference. Had the PAC not landed their 8th member, all hell would have broken loose. All of the PAC schools would have likely drifted back hat in hand and sought membership in the Mountain West Conference and just done a merger. That failure was not a likely scenario. But given all the mistakes the 2PAC has made in rebuilding the conference and the number of schools their approaches have turned off, it was a real possibility. So they're my final loser. I know you may not agree with all my points, but I hope some of them were eye-opening to you. If you like what I have to say, please subscribe. If you think others should hear this, give me a thumbs up, and the great YouTube machine will feed it to others. I hope you'll keep your eyes open for my next show on the precarious situation the AAC finds itself in, and why they may want to be on a conference call with Air Force and the Mountain West Conference Commissioner. Tune in next time.